Hello, everyone, and welcome to another show of Dojo Live, the final show for this week, this Thursday, October 27th, 2022. My name is Kim Lantis, and it's my pleasure to be hosting today along with America Guerrero.
Hey.
Hi, America. How are you doing?
Fine. I was waiting for my face to show up, so I'm ready.
Perfect. And who are we going to be conversing with today? We're very excited to introduce Sean Hinton, who is the CEO at Skyhive. Thank you for joining us, Sean.
Thanks, Kim. Thanks, America. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, it's going to be a really, really great conversation, something that I think is interesting to everyone, and that is human capital. But before we get into the topic of conversation, we'd really like to get to know you a bit better. Sean, if you could tell us your story, your passions, and kind of what's led up to your time with Skyhive. Thank you.
Sure. So Skyhive is chapter 3 of my career. I am Canadian, born and raised in Canada, but have lived all over the world. Chapter 1 of my career, I spent as a labor economist, and my area of expertise was career mobility. So I would work with companies through HR, leadership, governments, training and institutions, and developing programs, policy around moving people more fluidly through their careers. I took a very natural turn and went into the private sector and became president of the world's largest water park company, a company called Whitewater West.
How fun is that?
Yeah, I like to say that Skyhive is the best. That was the second best job in the world, other than Skyhive, and so I spent about 8 years building out the international markets for the company and eventually running the company. And Whitewater was the world's largest developer of water parks. So they do all the architectural design for parks, attractions design, attractions engineering, and manufacturing and construction project management. So clients like Disney, Six Flags, Carnival Cruise Lines, etc. And then I started Skyhive in 2016, and so started originally in Vancouver, and now Skyhive is in Silicon Valley, New York, Dublin, Tokyo, and Seoul.
Wow, absolutely, completely global, like your story. I love it. Well, that's amazing. So let's learn a little bit more about Skyhive. Who are you? What's the problem that you're solving?
So in 2016, I was perfectly happy doing what I was doing with the water park company, and I was in Dubai for an extended period of time. And I decided to take 2 days and attend a Congress of the Young Presidents Organization. So I'm a member of YPO. They host an annual Congress where all members from across the world gather. And that year they were hosting it in Dubai. At 10 o'clock in the morning on the first day of the conference, I attended a panel that was, the panelists were a group of Syrian women who had escaped Syria during the civil conflict and were living in the refugee camp in Lebanon. And they spoke to us about the atrocities of the treatment of women during the Syrian crisis. And I had a profound stream of consciousness leaving that session that I wanted to begin to focus my efforts and energy on doing something impactful for the planet. So although building water parks was a very profitable business and one where a lot of people had fun, putting fiberglass all over the planet was not necessarily my definition of impact. And so this was really the genesis for starting Skyhive.
That's amazing. And this is a large part of what really motivates the Dojo Live show is this storytelling, right? This connection that's made by stories, and just to see the impact of these women sharing their story and how it impacted your life, and then business and offshoots. It's fantastic. I would never, ever underestimate the power of a story. That's amazing. So let's talk about the topic that you chose today specifically, and some of the insight and what you've learned over this last, let's say, 6 years?
Yes, the topic is the Human Capital Operating System, 4 essential insights into the most valuable part of your business. So please share with us why this topic is important for today's show.
So when I set down the path of wanting to do something impactful for the world, it became very clear to me that I had a purpose to reskill the world. And what that means is, at that time, purpose was defined for me very differently. It was no longer an academic exercise that I would write on a whiteboard and describe what my purpose was. It's an unending love affair with solving a big problem. And the problem that I chose to solve in absolute gratitude to those women who had inspired me in Dubai was to reskill planet Earth. And I was asking myself the question, why do we have access to the most advanced computing power available in the world's history at the lowest cost to access it? Yet if I ask somebody, what are your skills? A very basic question. People would have a very difficult time answering that question. And if I ask somebody a question, which is, how do the skills that you've acquired in your work experience, life experience, and educational experience, in other words, your skill DNA, of which every human being on the planet has a unique skill DNA because we've all had different experiences in life, even twins will have different pathways and experiences. How does that unique skill DNA match to the changing nature of work and desired career pathways? And there was no way of solving that problem. And so I developed a methodology called quantum labor analysis, which is the application of artificial intelligence to analyze a workforce at its most granular level. So very simply put, we've built what you can think of as the Google for the world labor economy. It's tracking everything going on in real time, and machines are bringing it down to the most granular level of skills. And it was just at that time that the World Economic Forum, was making the statement, the world is moving from job-based to skill-based. And, how do you actually go through that process of moving from a traditional world of job descriptions and credentials into a far more granular denominator of skills? And so Skyhive was established as the human capital operating system, which is helping companies and communities, as well as individuals, move from a job-based world to a skill-based world through its operating system.
That's absolutely fantastic. And I'm really, really interested in knowing exactly how this works, the type of skills that you're tracking for, even how skills are tracked. I mean, what's coming to my mind is something like LinkedIn or that type of thing. But at the same time, most of that is dependent upon our own perception of ourselves, our own skill set, which I think we miss sometimes. We don't even realize some of the talents that we might have, or we're afraid to say it, or imposter syndrome and other types of things. So it's really, really interesting conversation. But I do want, before we move further into this conversation, to really tap into the most valuable part of your business. Now, I think the obvious answer here is that that's people, right? The human component. But can you hit on that just a little bit more? Like, why are people the most important, the most valuable, rather, part of a business?
So if you ever look at the pillars of the economy, land, labor, capital, and we look at the composition of what feeds those pillars, everything goes back to labor. And I'll tell an interesting sort of example. So the country of Sweden a few years ago decided that it wanted to become a world leader in green, the green economy. And so the government of Sweden developed a bunch of, economic policy and incentives to bring people from all over the world, new ideas, new companies, new foreign direct investment into Sweden. And they were hugely successful. So a whole bunch of organizations moved into Sweden. And then they realized about 6 months later, we don't actually have the talent in Sweden to fill the buildings and to actually contribute the knowledge that needs to go into all of this great momentum. And so it's stalled. And to me, that's a perfect example of why a workforce and the people that comprise that workforce are so important to the functioning, not only of a company, but of a society at large. The problem we have today is if we asked, if we took a survey of 100,000 people, 100,000 youth under the age of 20 years old, and they had not yet chosen their desired career pathway, and we said, how many of you would like to be a social worker or a nurse on a night call or a public school teacher, very few people are going to raise their hand. The problem is that these roles are fundamental to the functioning of any society, and we are never going to be able to produce the data scientists, the robotic surgery, sort of programmers and supervisors of the future if we don't have the core of any community in place with respect to skill set. So people are the answer to all of it.
And how does it work exactly? For example, I'm thinking of me as an individual. I'm looking to explore my skills, so maybe there is like another kind of opportunity out there. With SkyHive, how does it work? Do you provide a network? Do you provide like courses so you can improve on something, so you can find another industry, or how does it work?
Or what is the data that you're kind of scraping?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so before, if you ever wanted to consider, your career pathways, you'd go to a high school guidance counselor or a career counselor within a college or
Mr. Gates, he still has a very awesome place in my heart.
That's right. And Mr. Gates would sit down, and with his understanding of what's happening in the labor economy, he'd provide you with advice and guidance to helping you pursue your career. My view was, when I wanted to reskill the world, was I wanted to completely democratize that process for people. And so you can see with your own eyes and explore your own options with respect to a career pathway. And so our engine, as I said, is we're maintaining now over 1 petabyte of data. Now, there's not a lot of people who understand data. That is a huge amount.
I don't know. I don't think I've ever heard the term petabyte, to be honest.
Exactly. And so there are probably 20 companies on the planet that have actually applied this level of data and intelligence to any sort of problem. And so, and within that petabyte of data, we've actually revealed that there are 130 million career pathways that are happening all at the same time. 130 million career pathways. And what our technology does is it breaks everything down into skills. And so if, America, you have your skill DNA, you can say, okay, these are my skills, which is what SkyHive helps you understand through your skill profile or your skill passport. And now the machines automate what is your match in real time across all 130 million of those career pathways. So maybe you're an 86% match to a job. Maybe you're a 26% match to a job, and you can have that visibility. Now, when you are able to see that visibility, you're able to see the gaps. And the gaps will be very clear to you. You have these skills, you don't have these skills. And then what we do is we aggregate all of the incredible learning content that's being developed by, the Udemys and the Coursera's and the LinkedIn Learnings and others, and we bring that into the platform and boil that all down to skills and say, okay, America, if these are the gaps that you want to fill, the new skills that you want to collect, here's the training to go and do that. And now you don't have to worry about having to second guess these decisions, that automation is happening in real time. So as jobs are changing, skills are changing, and labor economies are changing, you're able to see that happening in real time. So to take a different perspective to it, if I were building curriculum in a college or university to train people, I would have the exact same examination. The course that I need includes these skills. These will fill these jobs. And how do I make sure that my courses are the most up to date in the world in being ready to prepare learners and workers for the future?
Wow. And I think that's amazing, because it helps the individuals and it also helps the institution, like you were referring to earlier, to help mold and create these individuals that we need. Is there also some overlap in terms of not just the career path, but the actual places, like in terms of company job positions that I could apply for? Is that connect being made as well?
Exactly. And so exactly what we do with training, we do with jobs. And so all of the jobs that are available in your community. So for example, we have a really amazing partnership with an organization called Jobs First New York City. And they help support youth and other types of workers in the boroughs of New York with getting community level training and access to employment. Mm-hmm. And so we're now mapping communities down Beautiful. To the community or neighborhood level in real time and helping people within those communities understand what are the skills that are in demand in the community, and how do I take the actual skills to getting, those jobs. And so exactly what we're doing with training, we're doing with jobs.
Interesting. And I understand too, on like a global scale, in terms of an organization who's doing something that's very niche, and maybe they'd be surprised, like, wow, you can actually find people with this exact skill set, and who knows, I don't know, Somalia or something. Like, start there. This would be a great place to set up a headquarters, or something that maybe you never even had thought of before.
Absolutely. We have a lot of our company clients, our enterprise clients, that work with us on what we call localization strategies, which is saying, where is the talent? Very similar to what I had expressed earlier about Sweden. Where is the talent, and how can we make sure that we're putting our company and our infrastructure into communities?
The eggs are in the right basket.
Exactly.
Perfect. And what in terms of like satisfaction in your petabyte of data, are you finding in terms of not only the laborers, the human capital, the people, but also where they're being plugged into? Are you finding that people are more satisfied with their choices in terms of fulfillment in their careers, and also just that output in terms of who they're working with and for as well?
Yeah, so really it goes to that word that I use, democratization, or we can put it another way, we can call it agency. So what it means is it's giving you the decision making to make your own choices about the training, the learning, and the jobs that you want. Right. And so we see incredible data and response because people now have that visibility themselves at the touch of their fingertips. They don't have to rely on managers sort of expressing to them, here's what's going to happen to you, or sort of bias. I mean, that's another element of Skyhive, where we are a strong public proponent of the ethical use of artificial intelligence. And so we're members of the Responsible AI Institute. I served for 2 years on the inaugural Global Partnership for AI, which was 26 countries that were coming together for developing frameworks for ethical AI. So that point on agency and democratization is extremely powerful.
Understood. Thank you. Let's tap into, I think we've already probably touched on these, but I would like to get this a bit more structured in terms of the 4 essential insights. What are, if you could list these out, the 1, 2, 3, 4 essential insights that you found to be part of this, human capital element?
Yeah, so if I can boil it down to 4 things that the world is asking and why they come to Skyhive, the 4 things are: what are the skills of my workforce today at an individual, departmental, and company-wide level, or even a country level? That's number 1. Number 2, what are the skills and jobs that are emerging in the external labor economies, within my industry, within my geography, or within my competition, that are going to impact my workforce now and into the future? Number 3, what are the gaps to what I have today and what's emerging? And number 4, how do I leverage learning and development, change management, workforce planning to bridge those gaps at pace and at scale?
I have a question. I'm a university student, so I constantly see that my teammates, or there are other like me students, that they don't know what they want to, they don't know their skills, they don't know what to do after university. So my question is, how do you obtain the information when there is no information?
So we spent 4 years aggregating the world's digital data, right? And so anything where there's a digital profile or a digital piece of information that's giving us a reflection of skills, and we have, tens of thousands of sources of that information. But exactly to your point, like right now, 62% of the world's population is connected to the internet. By the end of this decade, 100% of the world's population will be connected to the internet. So just to give you another statistic, prior to COVID, it was 49% or 47%.
What?
And
that's a huge jump.
That's a huge jump, and that's the pace that the world is moving. So what that represents for us is the single greatest moment in time from an abundance perspective to help connect people to training and job opportunities. In other words, the part of the world that is not yet connected to the internet, they don't have a local community where they can go down and apply for a job at the local department store or
Yeah.
at the bank. The only way that they're going to access opportunity is digitally.
Hmm.
And what's happening in parallel with this is that we are seeing the explosion of in a good way, of a digital labor market. And what does that mean? It means that I am working online to provide a product or service digitally that is paid for digitally. So there's no employment that's happening in a physical context, right? That market today is $6.5 trillion of GDP, which is the equivalent of the sixth largest economy in the world. And as a result of COVID and a lot of movement towards contingent labor, nomad labor, and entrepreneurship, that number is only going to continue to climb rapidly. So let's say it's something more like 8 trillion as opposed to 6.5 trillion when we get to the end of the decade. So we have this intersection now of this massive digital labor market, coupled with pretty much half the world's population coming online in these 10 years, which to me represents the single greatest opportunity for abundance that exists in connecting people with reskilling and with work. Now, going back to your question, America, as to, well, how do you reach the people that are not yet digital? And so about a year ago, Skyhive started doing initiatives that were collecting analog data that is not yet digital. So for example, the largest talent marketplace in Ghana happens at Sunday Church. More than 1 million people convene for their church service, and they exchange work opportunities, and they do that through SMS or through WhatsApp. So Skyhive has built widgets that are being integrated into these technologies that are now able to capture and digitize the type of labor market activity going on that is not yet digital. We've also retained a significant crowdsourcing effort across the world, where members of the crowdsourced community take pictures of job ads, pictures of classified ads, etc. And then we're digitizing that and mapping it across the entire world. So you can think of this as like, the Google car that's driving around getting the pictures for Google Maps. That's similar, it's an analogy to what we're doing at Skyhive with the labor market.
It's really beautiful. And tapping back into this word, I think maybe this is the third or fifth time we've used it, democratization, bringing in countries like Ghana and opening up opportunities, global opportunities for people who might not have ever had access to them. But I want to tap back into something that you mentioned earlier with your 4 essential insights, and that's the forecasting component. And as we're talking about, 100% of the world's population digitizing, increase in, knowledge workers and digital workers, what about the forecasting for those gaps that still need a physical human component and maybe a loss of those essential skills, things like agriculture and construction, mechanics, those are kind of what's coming to my mind. How do you have that sort of in your own, gauge? Are you looking at that, or how can we make sure that we keep this balance, that it doesn't become 100% digital, or is that the goal? Are there, talk to that a little bit.
Yeah, so fundamentally, Skyhive, we've established the philosophy with governments and with companies that reskilling the world or a company or a community at pace and at scale is only achieved through a combination of what I call art and science. So you can have the best technology in the world, Skyhive running information and all of these things, but if you don't actually enable the practitioners, the artists, the HR professionals, the teachers, the mentors, the coaches, the people who are actually holding the hands of taking people through a reskilling journey, you're not going to be successful with reskilling at pace and at scale. The labor markets are moving way too fast, and simply relying on a technology is not going to be sufficient. So then the question becomes, how do we arm the practitioners with the best information available for them to rapidly make the changes? And let's say one of those practitioners is government, and let's say we're seeing a shortage of nurses. For example, in Canada, there's now over 250,000 shortage roles, shortage of nurses.
Wow.
And so what we do is we prepare the data for governments to understand. Right now, it's 250,000. 6 months ago, it was 230,000. In 6 months, it's going to be 270,000. And unless you start with economic development incentives to helping communities understand, we need to increase wages, or we need to increase benefits in health and wellness, et cetera. How do you start to compose a job that's more representative of modern times and ensure that you're getting a good pool of candidates and a good pool of talent into those roles? And of course, education connects to this as well, because education are the ones that are providing the skill sets for these occupations. And so never before has there been the availability of data to show the problem clearly, simply,
Yeah.
and say, how do you come together and align your efforts towards solving these gaps?
And I think you just mentioned two of the biggest, if not the biggest players, right? Government and education. And it makes me think, like, in terms of your nursing example and the education role, this is probably a gross generalization and a reflection of my kids these days mentality, but not everybody can be a YouTuber or a TikToker. And it feels to me that that's the aspiration of a lot of youth today, and to be able to have these numbers, have these projections, and bring it back. And I think even express this urgency of these gaps that maybe aren't here yet, but will be. And it's extremely important for society as a whole, and how, maybe we can use that insight, bring that motivation into the educational system to, create a renewed sense of interest in the next generation of laborers, right?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at sort of, the influencer generation, I mean, this can be, analogous to, one's desire to be a rock star back in the 70s, or to be a Hollywood movie star in the 80s and 90s. The reality is that many try, and a fraction of a few succeed. And there's going to be a race to the bottom. So, you may have a handful of influencers that are earning, enough income to survive, but the vast 99.999% majority are not surviving on that type of career aspiration. So ultimately, at the end of the day, somebody's going to have to look at what are the 130 million career pathways, and where do I fit, and how do I begin to go into that process?
Yeah, the school of hard knocks. Yeah. I love it. Well, Sean, we're actually coming to the final few minutes of today's show. I do want to bring it back to you and Skyhive specifically, in terms of your company and the culture that you're building. I know the genesis of the company and the story with those women sharing their own story is a really, really beautiful one. How has that impacted your own company culture? And activities and processes that you follow, the type of people that you look for to work with you, and maybe some lessons learned or words of wisdom that you could share in that regard to other leaders who might be listening today.
Yeah, so the other element of the genesis of Skyhive was that, I was a successful kind of corporate leader, and this was not something that I had ever kind of aspired to do. This was something where the purpose just fueled it. And so I wanted to create a company that could be wildly successful from a traditional profit perspective, but drive true positive social impact in tandem. And so, and that really is for me a personal legacy piece, where I want to show entrepreneurs, after me, that you can really do the hard work of making a company that at its core is a good company for the world and is driving positive impact, but also has the opportunity to be wildly successful. And so I structured Skyhive as a B Corporation. We're a for-profit social impact organization. And I did that from day one. And what this means is, even to the corporation level or the governance level, that Skyhive is now obligated to operate both in the interests of shareholders, but also in the interests of society at large. And this is a very important piece, because it sets the structure for how the company will scale and evolve over time, whether or not I'm involved over time. And so the it is core to our DNA that we're working to both provide, a technology that's going to change the world, but also a culture that's going to change thinking as to how you build organizations in the future. And really, it is our number one recruitment tool, in the sense that Skyhivers join because of that mission. And we have an unrelenting focus on that. That's inherent in our core values as a company. That's in everything we do. So because of that, it's a flywheel. And now Skyhive has become, much bigger than any one person can impact, in the sense that today I simply service my company as its CEO, but this company is now its own entity and has its own community. And so I encourage everyone to be thought leaders and pick an area of reskilling that's of passionate interest to them, and build their own networks and influencing around that. It's really the quality of our people is going to determine how fast we can hit our vision of reskilling the world. We've already built the technology exists, the world is using it, the company is scaling. That none of that is a question anymore. Now what it comes down to is the quality of people and how their hearts and minds connect to the vision and mission and purpose of Skyhive. And so that's how we operate.
It's beautiful. And I think that opens up for a whole nother Dojo Live show, an entirely new conversation of how you recruit for that, how you build that, and how, what that process is. I think that would be a great interest to the audience for sure. But as it stands, we do have to wrap up today. Sean, this has been an extremely insightful and inspirational conversation for us today. I thank you so much for sharing your story and the Skyhive story with us today. We wish you nothing more than success.
Thank you, Kim. Thank you, America.
Awesome. You're welcome. Please stick around just for 1 minute as we go off air. But before we do, we'd like to remind you that on Monday we do have our recap show where we will be sharing with you our thoughts and takeaways from Sean's show and the other 2 shows that we had this week. Join us on Monday at 10 o'clock Pacific for that. And we'll be introducing, of course, next week's awesome shows as well. And until then, stay safe, everyone. Thank you for now.
Bye.